Rick married Sandra 3 years ago. From the outside, it was a beautiful wedding, an expensive restaurant, a limousine, a dress with a 5-meter train. Sandra, or simply Sandy, as he called her, was a striking woman. She always had a perfect manicure, the latest iPhone, and a handbag worth half the salary of an average manager. But Rick didn't love her. Or rather, at first, he thought he did. Sandy knew how to charm. She evoked emotion, aroused passion. But after just 6 months of marriage, the veil lifted. Rick realized he'd fallen into a trap. Sandy was cold, materialistic, and believed the world revolved around her. Their conversations boiled down to 3 topics: where to vacation in the summer, what car to buy, and which of her friends had married better. Sandra's greatest asset was her parents. Or rather, what they left her: a 3-bedroom apartment in the city center, a dacha, and a substantial bank account. It was this inheritance that became the magnet that kept Rick by her side for so long. He wasn't poor, but he wasn't rich either. He worked as a systems administrator at a large company, rented an apartment, and was saving up for his own. And then such a gift from fate, a loving woman with an inheritance who offered to share their home. But paradise quickly turned into hell. Sandy constantly reminded him whose apartment it was. Every renovation, every plate he bought, became a reproach. "You're living on everything you need. You could try harder," she'd say when he stayed late at work or didn't buy her yet another trinket. Rick endured. Endured for 3 years. He drowned out the inner voice that screamed, "Run." He was afraid of ending up on the street, afraid of starting over at 32. He became a shadow, a mere appendage to the expensive furniture and square footage. But everything changed when their department acquired a new employee, Sarah. She arrived wearing an old, faded raincoat, her hair wet, and holding a paper cup of coffee from a vending machine. While the other women eyed her, assessing her cheap shoes, Rick looked into her eyes. They were so full of life, warmth, and a kind of quiet sadness that it took his breath away. Sarah was the complete opposite of Sandy. She didn't demand restaurants, didn't wear poisonous lipstick, and didn't check his phone. They simply started talking. First, work breaks. Then smoke breaks on the stairs, then lunches at the nearby cafeteria. Rick remembered what it was like to laugh heartily, talk about books, dream of travel instead of a new fur coat. With Sarah, he felt like a man again. Strong, needed, capable of action. She didn't know he was living at someone else's expense. She saw him as an individual. Rick wasn't going to lie to Sarah. He knew that if they were serious, he had to tell her the truth. And he did. He told me everything. About his loveless marriage, about his wife's inheritance, about his weakness and fear. Sarah listened to him in silence. Then she stroked his hand and said, "Rick, I didn't fall in love with you for the apartment. But I don't want you to blame me in a year for becoming poor because of me. If you're leaving, leave completely, empty-handed. And we'll start from scratch. Here, in this little apartment. If you're ready, I'm with you. If not, go and live in your golden toilet." For Rick, this was the moment of truth. Sarah wasn't demanding money from him. She wasn't pretending to be a princess. She was offering him freedom at the price of poverty. He looked at her modest but cozy 1-room apartment, at the old teapot, at the broken tiles in the bathroom, and he knew, this is happiness. It doesn't smell like expensive perfume. It smells like honesty. The conversation with Sandra felt like an atomic bomb. "Have you packed your things?" she smirked, seeing him with a suitcase. "Found some cheap place and you think you've got it all. Sandy, it's not just cheap. I love her." "You love her?" His wife's voice turned icy. "You only love yourself, Rick. You spent 3 years eating my money, breathing my air, living in my apartment. And now you're walking away into nowhere? Do you even realize you have nothing? Your car was bought when we were married. It's mine. Leave the apartment keys on the nightstand. You're leaving with exactly what you came with. You'll leave with exactly what you came with." Rick felt like a complete loser. But a strange relief was growing inside. He was throwing off his shackles. Yes, he was left with nothing. But he was walking away free. And now he was standing on the threshold of Sarah's apartment. He had a backpack with socks, a diploma, and a couple of t-shirts on his back. In his pocket were 3,000 rubles in cash. He rang the doorbell. Sarah opened it. She saw his pale face, his backpack, and his shaking hands. Well, hello, poor guy, she smiled. But her eyes were tense. Rick walked into the hallway. His insides sank. He wasn't so much afraid of poverty as he was of her reaction. Now she would see him as a nobody. No apartment, no car, no savings. He would live in her one-room apartment, eating her food, until he found a new job that could support them. Sarah, I have to tell you something, he began. I left her. For good. I took nothing. Nothing at all. I have no money. I'm going to look for a second job. I'm going to. Shh. Sarah put her finger to his lips. I told you, I'm with you. But you have to answer me honestly one question. He nodded, braced for the worst. You don't regret it? She asked. You won't wake up tomorrow morning in this cramped Khrushchev-era apartment and regret trading luxury for love? Rick looked into her eyes, then looked around. Yes. It was cramped. Yes. The kitchen was barely big enough for two people to move apart. Yes. The neighbor's music was playing loudly through the wall. But Sarah was here. She stood nearby. The air smelled of pies, and geraniums bloomed on the old windowsill. Sarah, he said firmly, in those 3 years in that luxurious coffin, I haven't been happy for a single day. And here, in this hallway, smelling of your perfume and onions, I've been happy for 5 minutes now. She hugged him tighter than any woman in his life had ever hugged him. But, as the saying goes, with a loved one, even a hut is paradise. That's only in songs. In real life, the harsh everyday life set in. The first 6 months were hellish. Rick got a second job, working the night shift. He'd come home in the early morning, exhausted. They were counting every penny. Sarah stopped buying new clothes and wore out old sweaters. Instead of going to the movies, they watched movies on an old laptop, wrapped in a single blanket. One day, the washing machine broke. There was no money for a new one. Sarah had to wash everything by hand in the bathroom. Rick, returning from the night shift, found her doing this. Her hands were red, sweat beaded on her forehead, but she smiled and hummed. At that moment, Rick sat down on a stool and burst into tears. Like a man, like a boy, covering his face with his hands. He felt so ashamed that he, a grown, healthy man, couldn't provide the woman he loved with even the most basic comforts. That she, who deserved the best, was forced to hunch over a basin. Sarah, forgive me, Rick sobbed. I'm nothing. I've brought you nothing but trouble. Maybe you should find a normal man with an apartment. And I'm nothing. Sarah stopped washing, walked over to him, and hugged him from behind. Listen to me carefully, Rick. You're not nothing. You're my man. You could have stayed there with that doll, eating her caviar and despising yourself. But you chose me. You chose love. You chose honesty. You left with just a backpack because I'm more valuable to you than a square meter. That's more valuable than any washing machine. We'll get through this. Another 6 months passed. Rick got a promotion at his day job. Sarah got a raise too. They finally bought a washing machine, and then a new sofa to replace the old, creaky one. One evening, they were sitting on that sofa, drinking tea and looking out the window at the lights of the big city. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. Sandra stood in the doorway. She looked strange. Her expensive fur coat was draped over her shoulders, but there were shadows under her eyes, and her makeup was smudged, as if she'd been crying. Rick, she breathed, not even looking at Sarah. I feel bad. I realized I made a mistake. I was a bitch, but everything isn't the same without you. The apartment is empty, and I'm lonely. Let's try to start over. I forgive you for this. She nodded toward Sarah. This affair. Come back. Everything will be your way. Sarah stood silently and went into the kitchen, so as not to disturb him. She didn't humiliate herself. Didn't kick out her rival. She simply gave Rick the right to choose. Again, Rick looked at Sandra. At her fur coat, worth twice his salary, at her diamonds, at her capricious but beautiful face. Then he turned and saw Sarah through the crack in the kitchen door. Her back was to him, but her shoulders were tense. She was awaiting the verdict. Sandy, Rick said calmly, look around. Do you see this apartment? It's small, there's no jacuzzi or marble. But there's something here that your palace will never have. There's respect. There's love. And here's me, the real me. Not the one pretending to stay home. Goodbye. He closed the door in her face. He turned and went into the kitchen. Sarah stood, clutching the sink. You stayed, she whispered, without turning around. I already made my choice 6 months ago, Rick replied, hugging her. And today I simply confirmed it. They stood there for so long. And outside the window, the lights of the big city shone, where many were rich and many were poor, but only 2 out of millions were truly happy. Because happiness wasn't found in square meters, or in brand names, or in inheritance. Happiness was found in having the courage to leave empty-handed, but with a full heart. And Sandra, they say, sold that same luxurious apartment, bought a penthouse, and hired a young fitness trainer. But for some reason, no one tells the story of her happiness.